The invitation was a blade disguised as an olive branch. Liam Sterling, a man who built his empire on my discarded dreams, was inviting me, Isabel Ross, to the 10th anniversary gala of his architectural firm. He called it a gesture of no hard feelings. I knew what it really was, a public coronation for his new life and a final humiliating nail in the coffin of ours. He expected the mousy, broken woman he'd left behind. He was about to meet the woman I became in the ashes. The invitation wasn't just paper. It was a ghost. Thick, cream-colored cardstock, the kind that costs more than a week's worth of groceries used to. Liam's new corporate logo, a sleek, arrogant S that looked like a striking snake, was embossed in gold at the top. Sterling Designs cordially invites you to a decade of innovation. I traced the sharp edges with my thumb, the phantom pain of 1,000 paper cuts from our past flaring up. 5 years. It had been 5 years since I'd walked out of our shared life with nothing but a suitcase and the hollow echo of his parting words. "You were always holding me back, Izzy. You just don't have the vision." He wasn't wrong. Back then, my vision was limited to him. My world had been a small, carefully curated diorama of his needs, his ambitions, his schedule. I was the unpaid assistant, the silent partner, the sounding board for ideas I often planted myself, only to watch him harvest them as his own. I'd given up my scholarship to the Art Institute of Chicago to support his fledgling business, believing his success would be our success. It was a naive, girlish dream that shattered the day I found the receipts for hotel rooms and jewelry, purchases that weren't for me. His new wife, Chloe, was the beneficiary. She was younger, a socialite whose father owned half of the real estate Liam now built on. It was a merger, not a marriage. "You're not actually thinking of going, are you?" Maya's voice cut through the fog of memory. She was leaning against the doorframe of my studio, arms crossed, a fierce, protective glint in her eyes. My studio was my sanctuary, a chaotic, beautiful mess of stretched canvases, the sharp scent of turpentine, and the earthy smell of clay. Sunlight streamed through the massive warehouse windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny fairies. This space, this life, was the complete antithesis of the sterile, minimalist penthouse Liam and I had once called home. He sent it to my gallery address, I said, my voice quiet. He wanted to make sure I got it. He wants to show me what I lost. What you lost? Izzy, you escaped, Maya corrected, walking over to the workbench where I'd been mixing a shade of cerulean blue so deep it felt like you could drown in it. You lost a cheating, gaslighting narcissist who stole your best years and your best ideas. You lost sleepless nights wondering where he was. You lost the constant, crushing feeling of not being enough. She picked up the invitation, holding it between 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. This isn't an invitation. It's a summons. He wants to parade his victory in front of you. He wants to see you show up in a 5-year-old dress, looking defeated, so he and his little Barbie doll can feel superior. I looked around my studio. Canvases leaned against the walls, vibrant and alive with the emotions I'd poured into them. My series, Urban Echoes, had sold out at my first solo exhibition last year. I wasn't just surviving, I was on the cusp of thriving. I owned my own small gallery downtown, a place where I championed other emerging artists. I had built a life, brick by painful, liberating brick. And yet, that single piece of paper had the power to make me feel like that same trembling girl who packed her bags in silence, afraid to make a scene. The power imbalance had defined our relationship. He was the sun, and I was expected to be a pale, orbiting moon. He made the money, he had the connections, he held the world in his hands. I was just his wife, a supporting role. "He thinks I'm still that person," I whispered, more to myself than to Maya. "He has no idea who I am now." "Exactly," Maya's eyes lit up. "So you can't go. Don't give him the satisfaction." A different idea began to form in my mind, a slow, dangerous current pulling me in a new direction. For 5 years I had run from the ghost of Liam Sterling. I'd avoided the restaurants he frequented, the circles he moved in. I had built my new life in the shadows of his, always terrified of an accidental encounter. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to face the ghost and prove to myself that it had no power over me. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. "No," I said, my voice gaining a strength that surprised even me. I took the invitation from Maya's hand. The golden S glinted under the studio lights. "You're wrong. I have to go." Maya stared at me, her mouth agape. "Izzy, what are you talking about? It's a trap." "I know," I said, a slow smile spreading across my lips. "He's expecting a ghost. He wants to see the victim he created, but that woman is dead. He killed her, and he has no idea who he just invited to his party." The psychological conflict wasn't just with Liam, it was with the younger, weaker version of myself he had imprinted on my soul. Going to that gala wasn't about revenge, it was an exorcism. I needed to walk into the heart of my past, into his curated world of power and prestige, and not fall apart. I needed to see him and his new life, and feel nothing but the quiet hum of my own hard-won peace. "I'm not going to be his joke, Maya," I said, setting the invitation down next to my palette of brilliant, unapologetic colors. "I'm going to be his reckoning." The week leading up to the gala was a masterclass in psychological warfare, waged entirely within myself. Every morning I'd wake up with a knot of dread in my stomach, the voice of the old Izzy whispering doubts in my ear. "What are you trying to prove? You don't belong in his world anymore. They'll laugh at you." But then I'd walk into my studio, the scent of oil paint like smelling salts, and the new Isabel would take over. She was a warrior, and she needed armor. My transformation wasn't about impressing Liam. It was about embodying the woman I had become. It was a physical manifestation of an internal revolution. My first stop wasn't a designer boutique, but a place I hadn't visited in years, the storage unit where I kept the last vestiges of my former life. Tucked in the back, behind dusty furniture and boxes of forgotten kitchen gadgets, was a portfolio case. Inside were my old sketches from the Art Institute, designs for ethereal, flowing gowns that were more sculpture than clothing. I dreamed of being a textile artist once, before Liam had gently steered me toward the more practical path of supporting his ambitions. I found the sketch I was looking for, a dress designed to move like liquid moonlight, with a structured, almost architectural bodice that flowed into a cascade of silk. It was a design born from a younger, more hopeful mind, but I could now see the strength in its lines. With the sketch in hand, I went to see Madame Devereux, a semi-retired couturier whose genius was the stuff of Chicago legend. She worked out of a dusty, sun-drenched atelier in an old brownstone, and she only took on clients who intrigued her. She studied my sketch through her thick cat-eye glasses, her expression unreadable. "This is an ambitious design, mademoiselle. It requires a fabric that does not yet exist, and a woman who is not afraid to be seen." "I can handle being seen," I told her, my voice firm. "And the fabric, I have an idea." For the next 3 days, we worked side by side. I showed her a technique I'd been developing in my own art, infusing raw silk with a microfine metallic pigment, then layering it with chiffon. The result was a fabric that shimmered with an inner light, shifting from a deep midnight blue to a brilliant silver, depending on how it caught the light. It was the color of a twilight sky. Madame Devereux was enthralled, her old-world craftsmanship ignited by my modern artistic approach. She called it étoffe de lune, starlight cloth. While she and her team worked their magic, I focused on the rest of the armor. I had my hair, which I'd kept long and simple for years, cut and styled into a sophisticated shoulder-length wave that framed my face. The mousy brown was gone, replaced with a richer, darker shade that made my green eyes pop. I spent an afternoon with a makeup artist who taught me not how to hide my features, but how to highlight them, the strong line of my jaw, the arch of my brows. Each step was a reclamation. The woman in the mirror was no longer a pale reflection of someone else's expectations. She was a stranger, and I liked her. She looked formidable. The night of the gala, Maya came over to my apartment, a bottle of champagne in hand. She found me standing before the full-length mirror, staring at my own reflection. The dress was more magnificent than I could have imagined. It clung to my body in a way that was elegant and powerful, the starlight cloth shimmering with every slight movement. The neckline was a sharp, geometric cut that highlighted my collarbones, a stark contrast to the soft, flowing skirt that pooled around my feet. It was a work of art. My art. "Izzy," Maya breathed, her eyes wide. "Oh my God, you're not just going to a party. You're making a statement." "That's the idea," I said, my voice steady despite the frantic fluttering in my chest. "He's going to have a heart attack," she said, pouring 2 glasses of champagne. "Chloe is going to spontaneously combust." We clinked glasses. "To new beginnings," Maya toasted. "To closing old doors," I countered, taking a small sip. The final piece of armor was a necklace I had made myself. During the darkest days after the divorce, I'd taken a welding class. I'd found a strange comfort in melting and reshaping metal, in creating beauty from raw, unyielding materials. I had forged a simple, elegant silver choker, polished to a mirror shine. It was cool and solid against my skin, a physical reminder of the fire I had walked through to forge myself anew. As I got into the waiting car, the old Izzy made one last stand. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach. They will see you for what you are, the cast-off wife, the failed artist. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, picturing my studio, my art, my gallery. I pictured Madame Devereux's knowing smile and Maya's unwavering support. I had built an entire world for myself, a world that had nothing to do with Liam Sterling. He was a chapter, not the whole story. Tonight I was simply turning the page. "Are you ready, Ms. Ross?" the driver asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. I met my own gaze in the mirror. The woman looking back was calm, her eyes clear. She was ready. "Yes," I said, "I am." The gala was being held at the Adler Planetarium, a place Liam had chosen for its theatricality. Its domed ceiling and sweeping views of the Chicago skyline were a perfect backdrop for a man who saw himself as the center of the universe. From the moment I stepped out of the car, I could feel the energy of the event. A low thrum of self-importance, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and forced laughter. I paused at the entrance, taking a moment to center myself. The cool night air felt good against my skin. I could hear the gentle lapping of Lake Michigan against the shore, a steady, calming rhythm. Then I walked in. The effect was instantaneous. It was like a sound wave of silence radiated out from the doorway. Conversations faltered, heads turned, 100 pairs of eyes belonging to the city's elite, all fixed on me. They knew who I was. I was Isabel Sterling, the first wife, the discarded starter model, but the woman who stood before them didn't match their memories. I saw the confusion, the shock, the re-evaluation happening in real time. My dress, my étoffe de lune, seemed to drink in the ambient light of the room and reflect it back, creating a subtle aura that was impossible to ignore. I kept my chin high, my shoulders back, and walked into the lion's den, not as prey, but as an equal. And then I saw him. Liam was holding court near the center of the room, a glass of champagne in one hand, the other resting possessively on Chloe's lower back. He looked the same, impeccably tailored suit, a smile that was all teeth, an aura of supreme confidence. He was in the middle of a sentence when the hush fell over the room. He followed the gaze of his audience, his smile faltering as his eyes landed on me. For a full 5 seconds, he simply stared. The practiced charm vanished, replaced by a look of raw, unfiltered shock. His mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, but no words came out. It was as if he was seeing a ghost. but a ghost more vibrant and alive than anyone else in the room. Beside him, Chloe's perfectly manicured hand tightened on his arm. Her smile became a brittle, frozen thing. She was beautiful in a polished, predictable way, a classic blonde in a tight crimson dress that screamed for attention. But as she looked at me, a flicker of pure, unadulterated insecurity crossed her face. In that moment, she wasn't the victor. She was just a woman seeing a threat she had never anticipated. The spell broke. The murmur of conversation started again, but now it was different. It was hushed, urgent. "Is that Isabel?" I barely recognized her. "What is she doing here?" I ignored them all. My focus was on Liam. I gave him a small, enigmatic smile, a slight inclination of my head, and then I deliberately turned away, heading towards the bar as if his presence was of no consequence to me whatsoever. It was a calculated move, a reclaiming of power. I was not here to engage with him. I was here on my own terms. "A glass of your driest champagne, please," I told the bartender. As I waited, I felt a presence beside me. I didn't have to look to know who it was. The expensive, overbearing scent of his cologne was a memory I couldn't erase. "Isabel," Liam said, his voice a low, strained growl. "What the hell are you doing here?" I turned to face him slowly. Up close, I could see the faint lines of stress around his eyes that his expensive grooming couldn't hide. He looked older. "You invited me," I said simply, my voice calm and even. I took the glass of champagne from the bartender. It was a lovely gesture. I was touched. My placid response seemed to infuriate him more than an outburst would have. He was used to my tears, my emotional reactions. This cool, unbothered woman was a stranger to him. This was not, "I didn't expect you to actually come," he hissed, leaning closer. "And what is this costume? What game are you playing?" "No game, Liam," I said, taking a deliberate sip of my champagne. I let my eyes drift over his shoulder to where Chloe was watching us, her face a mask of anxious fury. I just felt it was time to stop hiding. "Don't you agree?" Before he could respond, a voice I recognized cut in. "Izzy, is that really you?" It was Marcus Thorne, one of the senior partners at the firm Liam had worked at before starting his own company. Marcus was a kind, older man with a gentle face and sharp, intelligent eyes. He had always been kind to me, treating me as more than just Liam's shadow. "Marcus," I said, my smile genuine now, "it's so good to see you." "My God," he said, taking my hand. He looked from me to Liam, whose face was now a thundercloud of controlled rage. "You look incandescent. I heard you opened a gallery. The Thorne Gallery on Michigan Avenue, right? My wife is a huge fan of your work. She bought one of your Urban Echoes pieces." The shock on Liam's face was almost comical. He had no idea. He had so thoroughly dismissed my art, my passion, that it never occurred to him that I could achieve success without him. He thought I was still painting sad little watercolors in a spare bedroom. "I'm so glad she enjoys it," I said to Marcus, turning my full attention to him and effectively dismissing Liam. "You must bring her by the gallery sometime soon. I have a new collection I'm preparing." I allowed Marcus to lead me away, leaving Liam standing alone at the bar, his hand clenched around his champagne flute. The power imbalance that had defined our marriage, the one he had tried to reinforce with his cruel invitation, had been completely upended in the space of 5 minutes. He had invited his ex-wife as a joke, expecting a pathetic footnote to his grand story. But the woman who showed up was a story all her own, and he was about to find out he wasn't the main character. Walking through the gala with Marcus Thorne at my side was like having a diplomatic passport. He was universally respected, a titan of Chicago's old guard architectural community, and his open admiration for me was a clear signal to everyone else. The whispers didn't stop, but their tone began to change. The pity was replaced by curiosity, the shock by a grudging respect. "I have to admit, I was surprised to see your name on the guest list," Marcus said, as we found a quieter spot near the massive windows overlooking the glittering city. I was surprised to be on it, I admitted. I suspect it was meant as some sort of closing statement. Marcus's eyes, full of wisdom, met mine. Well, if this is a closing statement, my dear, you're the one delivering it. Liam looks like he's seen a poltergeist. I couldn't help but laugh, a real, genuine laugh that felt liberating in this stuffy, pretentious atmosphere. It felt good to be seen, truly seen, by someone who had known me before and could appreciate the difference. Our conversation was easy and natural. We talked about art, about the changing face of Chicago's architecture, about his wife's charity work. He asked insightful questions about my gallery and the artists I represented. He listened, something Liam had never truly learned to do. With every passing moment, I felt the last vestiges of the timid, insecure woman I had been flaking away like old paint. From across the room, I could feel Liam's eyes on me. It was a hot, angry glare. He was used to being the center of attention, the sun in every room. But tonight, a new celestial body had entered his orbit, and it was pulling the gravity of the room with it. He was losing control, and he hated it. Several other old acquaintances drifted over, drawn by Marcus's presence. They were Liam's colleagues, clients, people who had known me as Mrs. Sterling. Their greetings were a mixture of awkwardness and awe. "Isabel, you look wonderful," said one woman, the wife of a major property developer. The last time I'd seen her, she had given me a pitying look at a charity luncheon right after the divorce was announced. Tonight, her eyes were wide with a kind of fascinated envy. "Thank you, Carol. So do you," I replied, my voice smooth as silk. They asked what I'd been up to, a polite way of asking how I'd managed to survive without Liam. When I spoke about my gallery, about curating shows and discovering new talent, I saw their perceptions shift in real time. I wasn't a divorcee living off alimony. I was a business owner, a peer. The ultimate test came in the form of Chloe. She approached our group with Liam in tow, his face set like granite. Her smile was dazzling, a weapon she wielded with expert precision. "Isabel, I'm so glad you could make it," she gushed, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright. She air-kissed the space beside my cheeks. "Liam was just saying how important it was to him that you be here to celebrate with us." It was a power play, an attempt to reframe my presence as something they had magnanimously allowed. She was positioning herself as the gracious lady of the manor and me as the charity case. "It was thoughtful of him," I said, my tone neutral. I didn't rise to the bait. I met her gaze evenly, letting the silence hang for a moment. Her smile faltered just a little. "And your dress," she continued, running a critical eye over me. "It's so unique. Did you make it yourself?" The insult was subtle, wrapped in a compliment. In her world, homemade was a slur. Before I could respond, Marcus stepped in. "It's a masterpiece, isn't it? Isabel is not only a brilliant curator, she is a gifted artist in her own right. This is wearable art." Chloe's eyes narrowed. This wasn't going according to her script. Liam, who had been silent and brooding, finally spoke. "Marcus, I need to steal you away for a moment. We need to discuss the Bennett proposal." It was a clumsy attempt to isolate me, to pull my powerful ally away. "Of course, Liam," Marcus said, but then he turned to me. "Don't you go anywhere, Izzy. I want to hear more about your upcoming exhibition." He gave my arm a reassuring squeeze before he left, a silent promise of his return. Left alone with Liam and Chloe, the temperature dropped. The thin veneer of civility evaporated. "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing by being here," Liam said, his voice low and venomous. "But this performance is pathetic. You waltz in here in some ridiculous get-up, trying to pretend you're something you're not." "And what am I, Liam?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I didn't raise it. I didn't need to. The meek little wife you could mold and dismiss. The woman whose ideas you could steal and call your own. You're right. I'm not her. You should be grateful for that. Chloe gasped, a theatrical little sound. "How dare you? Liam built this firm with his own 2 hands." "Did he?" I looked from her perfectly outraged face to Liam's furious one. Every empire is built on a foundation, Chloe. You should ask him sometime what or who his was built on. I didn't wait for a reply. I gave them a final dismissive smile and turned, walking away with a deliberate, unhurried pace. I could feel their stunned silence behind me. I had planted a seed of doubt, a crack in the perfect facade of their life. The tide of the evening had turned. I came here expecting to weather a storm of pity and condescension. Instead, I had become the storm, and from the look on Liam's face, he was beginning to realize he had nowhere to run. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal haze. I drifted through the crowd, engaging in light conversation, accepting compliments with a grace I didn't know I possessed. I felt like an actress playing the role of a lifetime, and the character was myself. With each person I spoke to, with every shocked and impressed face I encountered, the role felt more real, more true. I wasn't pretending. I was simply being. Liam and Chloe kept their distance, but I could feel their presence like a storm front on the horizon. They were circling, whispering to each other, their unified front beginning to show cracks. Chloe looked increasingly agitated, her perfect smile now a tight, anxious line. Liam was drinking more than usual, his movements becoming sharper, more aggressive. He was a king in his own castle, and he was watching a peasant lead a rebellion. My conversation with Marcus had spread through the room like wildfire. I was no longer just Liam's tragic ex-wife. I was Isabel Ross, owner of the Thorn Gallery, a rising star in the Chicago art scene. People sought me out, no longer out of morbid curiosity, but out of genuine interest. A well-known art critic, a woman whose reviews could make or break a career, introduced herself and told me she'd been meaning to visit my gallery for months. She promised to be at my next opening. This was a world Liam had tried to keep me from, a world he'd told me I wasn't good enough for. And here I was, thriving in it, right in the middle of his triumph. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The formal part of the evening began. Liam took to the stage to give a speech. He stood at the podium, bathed in a spotlight, the very picture of success. He spoke of vision, of dedication, of the relentless pursuit of excellence. He thanked his clients, his team, and then his wife. And finally, he said, his voice resonating through the microphone, I want to thank my beautiful wife, Chloe. She is my rock, my inspiration. Her unwavering belief in me is the wind in my sails. The crowd applauded politely. I stood near the back, my champagne glass still in hand, and I watched him. He was performing, just as I was. But his performance was hollow. He was reading from a script he'd written for himself long ago, a narrative of the self-made man. It was a lie. As he spoke, my mind drifted back to the early days, the tiny apartment we shared, the stacks of takeout containers because neither of us had time to cook. Me poring over his blueprints until 3 a.m, sketching suggestions in the margins, helping him rework flawed designs, brainstorming names for the firm he dreamed of. I remembered the night he'd been on the verge of giving up, completely demoralized after losing a major bid. I was the one who sat with him, talked him through it, and sketched out the preliminary concept for what would become his first breakthrough project, the waterfront revitalization. An idea I had sparked, a vision I had helped shape. He had taken that sketch, refined it, and presented it as his own singular genius. That project launched his career. He never once mentioned my contribution, not to me, not to anyone. At the time I told myself it didn't matter. His success was our success. Now, standing in the monument he'd built to himself, I felt a cold, hard anger crystallize in my chest. It wasn't just about a broken heart, it was about theft. He had stolen my creativity, my intellectual property, and built his kingdom on it. When the speech was over and the applause faded, he made his way through the crowd, accepting congratulations. His eyes found mine across the room. There was a challenge in them, a smug, triumphant glint. He thought he had won, that his public declaration of love for Chloe had put me firmly in my place. He was wrong. He approached me, his stride full of arrogance. Chloe was nowhere to be seen. "Quite a show, wasn't it?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I hope you enjoyed the party, Isabel. Consider it a parting gift, a little glimpse of the world you lost." I held his gaze, my expression unreadable. "The world I lost? No, Liam. This is a glimpse of the world I helped build, a world you took the credit for." His smile vanished. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I took a step closer, my voice dropping so only he could hear. "The Waterfront Project. Does that ring a bell? Late nights, cold coffee, a desperate husband and a wife with a sketchbook. You remember that night, don't you? You told me I had a knack for seeing the bigger picture." Colour drained from his face. For the first time all evening, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He had buried that memory so deep, convinced himself so thoroughly of his own lie, that he never imagined I would dare to bring it up. "You're delusional," he stammered, his bravado crumbling. "You were a supportive wife, nothing more." "I was your partner," I corrected him, my voice like ice, a silent one, "and you wrote me out of the story. You stood on that stage and talked about vision, but you and I both know whose vision truly launched Sterling Designs." I didn't need to scream or cry. The quiet, unassailable truth was more powerful than any emotional display. I had just taken a sledgehammer to the foundation of his identity. He wasn't the self-made genius. He was a fraud. And now I knew it, and he knew that I knew it. "Enjoy the rest of your party, Liam," I said, turning my back on his stunned, ashen face. "You've earned it." I walked away, not looking back. The psychological battle was over. It wasn't about winning him back or getting revenge. It was about reclaiming my own history, my own truth. And in his eyes I had seen the one thing I came here for, the complete and utter unraveling of his lie. The atmosphere in the room had changed. The air was thick with unspoken tension. My quiet confrontation with Liam had not gone unnoticed. Though no one could have heard our words, the sight of their host, pale and shaken after speaking with his ex-wife, was enough to set the gossip mill into overdrive. I needed some air. I made my way to the outdoor terrace, a sweeping stone balcony that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city lights shimmering on the dark waters of Lake Michigan. The cool breeze was a relief, clearing my head. I leaned against the balustrade, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the distant city sounds wash over me. I had done what I came to do. I had faced my dragon and walked out of the fire unscathed. The rest of the night was just epilogue. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Marcus Thorne's voice was a gentle intrusion. He came to stand beside me, holding 2 fresh glasses of champagne. He handed one to me. "It's my favorite thing about this city," I said. "It always looks like it's full of promise." "A bit like yourself tonight," he observed, his eyes kind. "I saw you speaking with Liam. I hope he wasn't bothering you." "He was just reminiscing," I said, choosing my words carefully. Marcus took a sip of his champagne, studying me over the rim of his glass. "You know, I was always fond of you, Izzy. You had a fire in you, a sharp mind. I often thought you were wasted, playing the role of the dutiful wife." His validation was like a balm on an old wound. I thought that was the role I was supposed to play. "Roles are cages, if we let them be," he said wisely. "It seems you've broken out of yours spectacularly. The talk of the party isn't Sterling Designs' 10-year anniversary, it's Isabel Ross." We stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the city breathe. It was a moment of peace in the midst of the emotional battlefield I had just navigated. But the war wasn't quite over. The terrace doors slid open with a sharp swoosh, and Chloe stepped out. She had shed Liam and was now on a solo mission. Her crimson dress looked garish under the soft moonlight. She approached me, her heels clicking aggressively on the stone. "There you are," she said, her voice tight with forced pleasantry. She completely ignored Marcus. "I was hoping for a chance to talk to you, woman to woman." I straightened up, my internal alarms on high alert. This was not going to be a friendly chat. "Chloe," I acknowledged coolly, "I just want you to know that I understand this must be difficult for you," she began, her tone dripping with condescension. "Seeing all of this, seeing Liam so happy, it must be a painful reminder of what you lost." This was her strategy, to paint me as the jealous, bitter ex-wife, a narrative she could control. "I'm not in pain, Chloe," I said calmly. Her eyes flashed. My refusal to play the victim was infuriating her. "Oh, please, you can drop the act. Coming here dressed like that, trying to make a scene, it's all rather pathetic. You need to accept that you lost. I won. He chose me." "He didn't choose you, Chloe," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "He chose your father's money. It was a business transaction. And you chose a man who would build you a beautiful house on a rotten foundation. So in a way, I suppose you're perfect for each other." A strangled sound escaped her lips. She looked around wildly as if searching for a weapon. Her eyes landed on the full glass of red wine someone had left on a nearby table. In a move that was both clumsy and vicious, she stumbled, lurching towards me and sloshing the dark red liquid all down the front of my dress. "Oh my God!" she shrieked, her performance of shock worthy of an Oscar. "I am so sorry. I'm so clumsy." A dark, ugly stain bloomed across the shimmering fabric of my starlight cloth. It was a deliberate act of vandalism, a desperate attempt to ruin my poise, my art, my moment. The old Izzy would have crumpled, burst into tears, and fled in humiliation. But the old Izzy was gone. I looked down at the stain, then up at Chloe's triumphant, faux-horrified face, and I smiled. "Don't worry about it, Chloe," I said, my voice ringing with clarity in the sudden silence on the terrace. Marcus was staring at her, his face a mask of utter disgust. Accidents happen. Then I did something she never could have anticipated. I picked up my own glass of golden champagne. With a steady hand, I tilted it and poured the effervescent liquid directly over the red wine stain. "A little club soda or champagne is the best thing for a red wine stain," I explained to her, as if she were a child. "It helps lift it right out, you see?" The champagne fizzed, diluting the red into a pale, watery pink. The stain was still there, but it was muted, softened. My action was so unexpected, so full of calm control, that it completely defused her attack. I had taken her act of aggression and turned it into a domestic science lesson. She stared at me, speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She had tried to mark me, to ruin me, and I had simply cleaned it up. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I said, handing my empty glass to a stunned but impressed-looking Marcus. "I believe it's time for me to leave. I have an early morning. Art to create, you know." I gave Chloe one last pitying look. "You can keep him," I said softly. "I'm creating my own masterpieces now." I turned and walked back through the glass doors, leaving her standing on the terrace, covered in the metaphorical splashback of her own failed attack. I had checkmated the queen, not by flipping the board, but by simply playing a better game. My exit was as quiet and deliberate as my entrance. I didn't need a dramatic farewell. The drama was in the details, in the wine stain on my dress that looked more like a watercolor painting than a mark of shame, in the stunned silence of Chloe on the terrace, and in the ghost-white face of Liam, who watched me walk towards the door from across the room. Marcus insisted on walking me out. As we passed through the grand hall, the buzz of conversation followed us. I knew what they were saying. They had witnessed the entire terrace incident. Chloe's petty act of aggression had backfired spectacularly, exposing her insecurity for all to see. My calm, controlled response had solidified the evening's narrative. I was not the victim. I was the victor. "That was the most graceful display of power I've ever witnessed," Marcus said, as we waited for the valet to bring my car. "It wasn't about power," I said, though I knew that wasn't entirely true. "It was about not letting her ruin my dress." It's one of a kind." He chuckled. "So are you, Isabel. So are you." He handed me his business card. "My wife wasn't exaggerating. She's a great admirer of your eye for talent. She sits on the board of the Contemporary Arts Fund. They're looking for a new partner to help them discover and sponsor emerging artists. The position comes with a significant endowment." I stared at the card, then at his face. This was more than just a casual offer. It was a door opening into a world of influence and opportunity I had only dreamed of. "They should be talking to you, Isabel," he continued. "Your gallery is exactly what the Chicago art scene needs. Fresh, bold, uncompromising. Call me on Monday. We'll set up a lunch with the board." The valet pulled up with my car. I turned to Marcus, a wave of genuine gratitude washing over me. This one night, this one terrifying, liberating night, had changed the trajectory of my future. I had walked in hoping for closure. I was walking out with a new beginning. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "for everything." "You earned it," he said with a warm smile. As I drove away, I glanced back at the planetarium. It looked like a temple dedicated to a forgotten god. I thought of Liam and Chloe inside, left to deal with the wreckage of their perfect party. The foundation of their life together, built on his ego and her father's money, was inherently unstable. I had just exposed the cracks. The next few days were a blur. On Monday, I called Marcus. Lunch with the Contemporary Arts Fund board was set for Wednesday. I spent Tuesday preparing a presentation showcasing the artists I represented, outlining my vision for a city-wide mentorship program, my passion and professionalism on full display. The story of the gala, meanwhile, had taken on a life of its own within Chicago's elite circles. The story morphed and grew with each telling, but the core elements remained the same. Liam Sterling's ex-wife had shown up looking like a goddess. His new wife had publicly humiliated herself, and Isabel Ross was a force to be reckoned with. The fallout for Liam was swift and brutal. His business was built on image and reputation. The whispers about his instability, about Chloe's crass behavior, began to affect his bottom line. But the real damage came from an unexpected source. Marcus Thorne, disgusted by Liam's and Chloe's behavior, had a private conversation with a few key players in the city's architectural community. He didn't need to say much. He just planted a seed of doubt. "It's a shame about Liam," he might have said over drinks at the club. "All that talent, but he seems to have forgotten where his best ideas came from." The story of the waterfront project, my story, began to circulate in a more coded, deniable form. It was a rumor, a piece of industry gossip, but it was corrosive. Clients, already wary of the personal drama, started pulling back. The Bennett proposal, the one Liam had tried to use to distract Marcus, was put on indefinite hold. Liam's empire, built on a stolen foundation, was starting to crumble. He had tried to use his power to humiliate me, but he had miscalculated. He failed to understand that true power isn't about wealth or status. It's about integrity. It's about owning your own story. And his was a lie. I had spent 5 years building a life. He had spent 10 years building a brand. And when tested, my life had proven to be built of stone, while his brand was nothing but a house of cards in a rising wind. A month after the gala, I was in my studio, putting the finishing touches on a new painting. It was different from my other work. Bolder, more abstract, full of color and light. It felt joyful. The partnership with the Contemporary Arts Fund had been confirmed. My gallery was expanding. My life was moving forward at a dizzying pace. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was excited by it. The buzz of my phone startled me. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello, Izzy." The voice was thin, ragged. All the booming confidence had been stripped from it. It was Liam. "I need to see you," he said without preamble. "I don't think that's a good idea, Liam." "Please," he begged. And the word was so foreign in his mouth it shocked me into silence. "Just once, to talk, my office." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Curiosity, perhaps, or the need for a final, definitive period at the end of our long, painful sentence. His office, once the gleaming nerve center of his empire, felt different. It was still luxurious, but there was a layer of dust on the glass desk, a stack of unopened mail. The energy of the place was stagnant, defeated. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his expensive suit hung on him, and the dark circles under his eyes told a story of sleepless nights. Chloe was gone. She had left him the week before, her father pulling all his investments out of Sterling Designs. As a final act of retribution, the merger was officially dissolved. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair I didn't take. I remained standing, a silent refusal to get comfortable in his world again. "What do you want, Liam?" He paced the room, his movements agitated. "I want to understand. Why? Why did you do it? You came to my party to destroy me." I finally looked at him, really looked at him, and what I saw was not a monster, but a small, broken man. The power he had wielded over me for so long was an illusion, a costume he wore to hide his own profound insecurity. "You're wrong," I said, my voice devoid of anger. There was nothing left to be angry about. "I didn't come to destroy you. I came to save myself. I came to prove to myself that you had no more power over me. The rest, all of this," I gestured around the failing office, "this is the consequence of your own choices, your own lies." He stopped pacing and stared at me, his eyes searching my face for a flicker of the old Izzy, the one who would have comforted him even after he had hurt her. She wasn't there. "The waterfront project," he whispered, the words like smoke. I was desperate. I was going to fail. That sketch, it was brilliant. I told myself it was for us, that our success would justify it. "There is no us, Liam," I said softly. "There hasn't been for a very long time. You built your career on my silence. Did you really think it would last forever?" He finally sank into his chair, his head in his hands. He didn't cry. He just seemed to deflate, all the air going out of him. "What do I do now?" he asked the empty room. It wasn't a question for me. It was the desperate plea of a man who had lost his own story. He had spent so long playing the part of the genius architect that he had no idea who he was without the costume and the stage. My redemption was never about his destruction. It was about my own rebirth. Seeing him like this, stripped of his power, his prestige, his wife, I felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, not even the ghost of love. Just a profound and final sense of release. He was a stranger. Our story was over. "That's for you to figure out," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "Goodbye, Liam." I turned and walked out of his office, out of his building, and into the bright Chicago sunlight. I didn't look back. There were no more ghosts behind me. The echoes of the past had finally faded into silence, replaced by the beautiful, vibrant sound of my own life, waiting to be lived. 6 months later, the Thorn Gallery was a hub of vibrant activity. The partnership with the Contemporary Arts Fund had allowed me to take on 3 new artists, and the opening night of our first joint exhibition was a massive success. The gallery was packed with critics, collectors and art lovers, the air buzzing with excited conversation. I stood near the back, watching the scene unfold. My new painting, the joyful, abstract piece I'd finished the day Liam called, hung in a place of honor. I had titled it Unwritten. Marcus found me, a proud, fatherly smile on his face. "You've done it, Isabel," he said, his voice warm. "You've changed the conversation in this city." "We've done it," I corrected him, smiling back. Our relationship had evolved into a beautiful friendship and a powerful professional alliance. He was my mentor, my champion. His belief in me had been a crucial catalyst, but I knew deep down that I had been the one to do the work. I had found my own strength. Across the room, I saw the art critic who had introduced herself at the gala. Her review of the show had been a rave, singling out my curator's eye for raw, emotional truth. The truth. That was what it had all been about. Living my own truth, unapologetically. Later that evening, after the crowds had thinned, Maya and I were closing up. "Do you ever hear about him?" she asked quietly, polishing a glass. I knew who she meant. I had heard whispers. Liam had sold his firm for pennies on the dollar and moved away. Some said he was in California, trying to start over. Others said he was living with his parents. I didn't know, and I didn't care. His story was no longer connected to mine. He was a footnote in a book I was no longer reading. "No," I said honestly, "I don't." She looked at me, her eyes searching. "Are you happy, Izzy?" I looked around the beautiful space I had created, at the art that lined the walls, at the reflection of the strong, confident woman in the gallery window. My life wasn't a fairy tale. It was real, and it was mine. It was a blank canvas, and every day I got to pick up the brush and decide what masterpiece to create. "Yes," I said, and the word was as solid and as true as the ground beneath my feet. "I really am." Isabel's journey wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. She walked back into her past, not to burn it down, but to retrieve the parts of herself she had left behind. She reminds us that true power isn't about the life you project to the world, but the one you build within yourself, brick by honest brick. Her story is a testament to the fact that sometimes the most beautiful art is the life we create from the ashes of who we used to be. It proves that the end of one story can be the magnificent, unwritten beginning of another. If this story of transformation and empowerment resonated with you, please hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more tales of redemption and strength.
The rain hammered against Amelia's window, mirroring the storm raging inside her. 5 years. 5 years she'd built a life with Daniel. A comfortable, predictable life. Until the ghost of a first love, a youthful passion she thought long buried, resurfaced, whispering promises of a different kind of happiness. She'd listened, and in doing so, shattered everything. Now, scrolling through the glossy pages of a magazine, his face, Daniel's face, stared back at her. No longer the kind, slightly rumpled man she'd left, but a sharp-edged, impossibly wealthy titan. A billionaire. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd traded stability for a fleeting dream, and while she chased shadows, he had built an empire. What happens when the past, in its most powerful form, comes knocking? Amelia traced the rim of her lukewarm coffee, the silence of the suburban kitchen pressing in on her. It was a silence that had become commonplace in the last few months, a stark contrast to the easy banter that had once filled this space. She glanced at the framed wedding photo on the counter. A younger, happier version of herself, beaming beside Daniel, his arm wrapped securely around her. A pang of guilt, sharp and familiar, pierced through her. The truth was a knot in her stomach, tightening with each passing day. Ben, her college sweetheart, had reappeared in her life like a half-forgotten melody suddenly playing on the radio. The years had melted away during their reconnecting phone calls and tentative meetups. He was everything Daniel wasn't: adventurous, spontaneous, a whirlwind of creative energy. Daniel was steady, reliable, a comforting harbor, but lately, comfort felt like a gilded cage. She knew what she had to do. It was a conversation she'd rehearsed 100 times in her head, each version ending in a different shade of pain. Daniel deserved honesty, even if it broke him, and by extension, her. He came home late from the architectural firm, his tie loosened, a weariness etched around his eyes. Amelia's heart clenched. He worked so hard, always putting their future first. How could she do this to him? "Hey," he said, his voice gentle, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "Something smells good." Dinner was on the stove, a feeble attempt at normalcy. Amelia forced a smile. "Chicken pot pie, your favorite." The meal passed in strained conversation. Amelia picked at her food, the words lodged in her throat. Finally, as Daniel cleared the plates, she took a deep breath. "Daniel, can we talk?" He looked at her, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Of course. What is it?" He sat down at the kitchen table, his full attention on her. Amelia's hands trembled in her lap. This is really hard." She paused, searching for the right words, the least destructive way to detonate their life. I've been seeing someone." The air in the kitchen seemed to thicken. Daniel's expression didn't immediately change. He simply stared at her, a slow dawning of disbelief spreading across his face. "Seeing someone? What are you talking about, Amelia?" His voice was low, incredulous. "Ben," she whispered, the name hanging in the silence. "Ben Miller, from college." The disbelief morphed into something darker. Hurt, confusion, a raw vulnerability that tore at Amelia's resolve. "Ben? You haven't seen him in 15 years. How? He reached out a few months ago," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "We started talking, and things just happened." Daniel's silence was more damning than any accusation. He looked as though she had physically struck him. "Things just happened?" he finally repeated, the words laced with a bitter irony. "Amelia, we have a life. A home. We have each other." "I know," she choked out, tears welling in her eyes. "And I'm so sorry, but I'm not happy, Daniel. Not truly happy." It sounded hollow, even to her own ears. "Not happy?" he echoed, his voice rising slightly. "What about all the plans we made? The trips we talked about? The family we wanted to start?" "I thought I wanted those things," Amelia said, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "But Ben makes me feel alive in a way that I haven't felt in a long time." The hurt in Daniel's eyes deepened, replaced by a coldness she had never witnessed before. "So that's it then? 15 years of history, 5 years of marriage, thrown away for a nostalgic fantasy?" Amelia flinched at the harshness in his tone. "It's not like that," she protested weakly. "Isn't it?" He stood up, his chair scraping against the tiled floor. He walked over to the window, his back to her. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken accusations and shattered promises. "I'm leaving, Daniel," Amelia finally said, the words heavy with finality. "I'm going to live with Ben." He turned slowly, his face pale. "Just like that?" "I'll pack my things tonight," she said, avoiding his gaze. The guilt was a crushing weight, but beneath it, a sliver of something akin to excitement flickered. The allure of the unknown, the promise of a different future. Daniel simply nodded, his eyes empty. "Okay." The next few days were a blur of packing, logistical nightmares, and stilted conversations. Daniel remained outwardly calm, a chilling politeness masking the devastation she knew he must be feeling. He didn't beg her to stay, didn't rage, didn't even cry. His quiet acceptance was almost worse than anger. As she stood on the doorstep, suitcase in hand, the reality of her decision crashed down on her. She looked back at the house, the home they had built together, and a wave of regret washed over her. Daniel stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Goodbye, Daniel," she said softly. "Goodbye, Amelia," he replied, his voice flat. Then she turned and walked away, towards the waiting car and the uncertain future with Ben, leaving behind the only life she had known. The initial weeks with Ben were a whirlwind of passion and rediscovery. They moved into his small, artfully cluttered apartment in the city, a stark contrast to the comfortable suburban house she had shared with Daniel. Everything felt new and exciting. Late-night talks, impromptu weekend getaways, a sense of freedom she hadn't realized she was missing. Ben was a freelance graphic designer, his life less structured, more fluid than Daniel's. Amelia found herself swept up in his artistic world, attending gallery openings and collaborating on projects. It was a stark departure from her previous life, where evenings were spent discussing Daniel's work deadlines and planning home renovations. But the initial euphoria began to fade. replaced by a subtle unease. Ben's passion, while initially exhilarating, sometimes bordered on chaotic. His finances were unpredictable, and his creative energy often translated into a lack of focus on practical matters. Amelia, accustomed to Daniel's meticulous planning and financial stability, found herself worrying about things she had never had to consider before. The differences between Ben and Daniel, once appealing in their novelty, started to become sources of friction. Ben's spontaneity sometimes felt like irresponsibility, and his artistic temperament occasionally veered into moodiness. Amelia missed Daniel's calm pragmatism, his unwavering support, the quiet comfort of their routine. She also found herself haunted by the memory of Daniel's quiet resignation. Had she made a terrible mistake? Was the passion with Ben worth the collateral damage? She tried to push these thoughts away, focusing on building a new life, but they lingered like unwelcome shadows. Months turned into a year. The initial spark with Ben dimmed, replaced by a comfortable familiarity that felt less than she had hoped for. Arguments became more frequent, usually stemming from financial disagreements or Ben's lack of follow-through on commitments. Amelia found herself taking on more responsibility, a role she had subconsciously expected Ben to fill. One evening, while cleaning up after a particularly tense argument about overdue bills, Amelia stumbled upon a box of old photographs. There she was, a younger version of herself, laughing with Daniel on their honeymoon, holding hands on a hike, decorating their first Christmas tree. Each picture was a stab to the heart, a reminder of the solid, loving foundation she had willingly dismantled. She picked up a photo of Daniel, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled at her. A wave of profound sadness washed over her. She hadn't just left a life. She had left a good man. A man who had loved her unconditionally. What had she been thinking? While Amelia navigated the complexities of her new life, Daniel was grappling with the wreckage of the old. The initial shock and hurt had given way to a quiet determination. He threw himself into his work, the intricate details of architectural design offering a temporary escape from the gaping hole Amelia had left in his life. His colleagues noticed the change. The easygoing Daniel was still there, but there was a new intensity, a relentless drive that hadn't been present before. He took on more projects, worked longer hours, poured every ounce of his energy into his career. It was as if the pain of betrayal had forged a new, unyielding steel within him. He also made a conscious effort to rebuild his life. He reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and started seeing a therapist to process the emotional fallout of the divorce. It wasn't easy. There were days when the loneliness was a physical ache, when the memories of Amelia flooded his mind, sharp and painful. But he persevered, slowly, painstakingly, piecing himself back together. One evening, a former client, a real estate developer with ambitious plans, reached out to Daniel with a groundbreaking proposal. It was a risky venture, a large-scale urban redevelopment project that had the potential for immense profit, or equally immense failure. Daniel, fueled by a newfound sense of daring, saw it as an opportunity to prove himself, to build something significant. He poured every waking moment into the project, his architectural vision and meticulous planning proving to be a winning combination. The project was a resounding success, catapulting his small firm into the spotlight. Other lucrative opportunities followed, and within a few years, Daniel's company had grown exponentially. He had become a force to be reckoned with in the city's development scene. He moved out of the suburban house, the memories too potent, and bought a sleek, modern penthouse overlooking the city skyline. His life was unrecognizable from the quiet existence he had once shared with Amelia. He was wealthier than he had ever imagined, his days filled with high-stakes negotiations, innovative designs, and the buzz of success. But beneath the polished exterior, a part of him remained guarded. The betrayal had left a scar, a deep-seated wariness of vulnerability. He dated, but never allowed anyone to get too close. The fear of repeating the past always lurking in the back of his mind. He rarely thought of Amelia anymore, or so he told himself. He had deliberately buried those memories, focusing solely on his present and future. But every now and then, a fleeting image would surface. Her smile, the way she used to hum while cooking, a ghost of a life he had once cherished. 5 years had passed since Amelia had walked out of Daniel's life. Her relationship with Ben had run its course, ending not with a dramatic blow-up, but with a slow, quiet drifting apart. The passion had long since faded, replaced by a weary resignation. They had simply wanted different things, their fundamental incompatibilities becoming too glaring to ignore. Amelia found herself living alone in a small apartment, working a mundane administrative job, a far cry from the life she had envisioned with Ben. The freedom she had craved now felt like an isolating emptiness. She often thought about Daniel, not with longing for the past, but with a sense of regret for the way she had handled things. One rainy afternoon, while waiting at a coffee shop, she picked up a magazine. On the cover was a photo of Daniel, looking confident and powerful, an article detailing his latest real estate triumph. The headline screamed, "Local architect becomes billionaire mogul." Amelia stared at the picture, a strange mix of shock and disbelief washing over her. The man in the photo was almost unrecognizable. The gentle, slightly rumpled Daniel she remembered had been replaced by a sharp-featured, impeccably dressed tycoon. A wave of unexpected emotion surged through her. Surprise, a pang of something akin to pride, and a sharp stab of what could only be regret. She read the article, learning about his incredible success, his innovative designs, his growing influence in the city. It was as if he had not only moved on, but had soared to heights she could never have imagined. Later that week, a mutual friend, Sarah, reached out to Amelia. "Are you going to be at the charity gala next month?" she asked casually. "Daniel's company is sponsoring it." Amelia hesitated. The thought of seeing Daniel again, especially in his new position of power, was daunting. I don't know," she stammered. "You should come," Sarah urged. "It's for a good cause, and it would be nice to catch up." Against her better judgment, Amelia agreed. As the date of the gala approached, she felt a growing sense of unease. What would she say to him? How would he react to seeing her after all this time? The night of the gala arrived, a glittering affair held in a grand ballroom. Amelia felt out of place in her simple dress amidst the sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. She scanned the crowd, her heart pounding in her chest, and then she saw him. He was standing across the room talking to a group of elegantly dressed people. He looked even more striking in person, his presence commanding attention. Their eyes met briefly, and for a fleeting moment, the years seemed to melt away. There was a flicker of recognition in his gaze, followed by a carefully constructed neutrality. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. This was no longer the man she had left. This was a different Daniel, a man who had risen from the ashes of their broken marriage, stronger and more powerful than she could have ever imagined. Amelia found herself gravitating towards the edge of the ballroom, wanting to disappear into the anonymity of the crowd. But Sarah spotted her and steered her towards a group, including Daniel. "Daniel, have you seen Amelia?" Sarah asked, her tone a little too bright. Daniel turned, his expression carefully blank. "Amelia," he said, his voice calm and even. "It's been a while." "Daniel," she replied, her own voice barely a whisper. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, with the weight of their shared history. The conversation that followed was stilted and polite, filled with superficial pleasantries. They spoke about the weather, about the charity, carefully avoiding any mention of the past. Amelia couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in him, the air of confidence, the almost imperceptible coolness in his eyes. As the evening progressed, Amelia found herself observing Daniel from a distance. He moved through the crowd with an easy grace, commanding attention without even trying. He was surrounded by influential people, laughing and engaging in animated conversations. He seemed completely at ease, a world away from the quiet architect she had once known. Later, as the crowd thinned, Amelia found herself alone near the balcony, looking out at the city lights. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Daniel standing there. "Beautiful view," he said, his voice softer now. "Yes, it is," Amelia replied, her heart pounding in her chest. A long silence stretched between them, filled with the ghosts of their past. Finally, Amelia broke the silence. "Daniel, I wanted to say..." She hesitated, unsure of what she wanted to say. "I read about your success. It's incredible." A faint smile touched his lips. "Thank you, Amelia. You've built something amazing," she continued, her gaze fixed on the city below. "I have," he acknowledged, his tone neutral. Another silence descended, heavier this time. Amelia felt a wave of regret wash over her, not just for leaving him, but for the pain she had caused. "Daniel, I'm sorry," she finally said, the words barely audible. "For everything." He turned to face her fully, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Sorry for what, Amelia?" His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. "Sorry for leaving? Sorry for breaking our vows? Sorry for choosing someone else?" The directness of his words stung. "Yes," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "All of it. I was selfish and foolish. I thought I was chasing happiness, but I just ended up hurting you. And myself." He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze searching. "It's been a long time, Amelia," he finally said. "A lot has changed." "I know," she replied, her voice trembling. "I see that." "You left, Amelia," he said, the words hanging in the air. "You made your choice." "And I was wrong," she admitted, the words a painful spikarakti. He didn't respond, his silence speaking volumes. The chasm between them felt vast and insurmountable, a consequence of her choices. Over the next few months, Amelia found herself replaying her conversation with Daniel over and over in her mind. His words, his cool demeanor, the undeniable distance between them. They all served as a stark reminder of the consequences of her actions. She tried to move on, to focus on her own life. But the encounter with Daniel had stirred something within her. She couldn't shake the feeling of regret, the knowledge that she had thrown away something truly valuable. She learned through Sarah that Daniel was involved in a new relationship with a successful businesswoman who seemed to be his equal in ambition and drive. The news, while not entirely surprising, brought with it a fresh wave of sadness. He had moved on, found happiness again, and she had no place in that new life. One day, Amelia received an unexpected email from Daniel's office. He was proposing a meeting, a discussion about a potential collaboration on a community development project. Amelia was taken aback. Why would he want to work with her after everything that had happened? She agreed to the meeting, her curiosity and a flicker of hope overriding her apprehension. When she walked into Daniel's impressive office, overlooking the city, she felt a pang of her old inadequacy. He was so successful, so in control, while her own life felt stagnant and small. Daniel was polite and professional during the meeting, discussing the project with a detached efficiency. He didn't mention their past, didn't offer any personal remarks. Amelia found herself both relieved and disappointed by his cool demeanor. As the meeting concluded, Amelia hesitated, a question lingering on her lips. "Daniel," she began tentatively, "why did you ask me to be a part of this project?" He looked at her, his gaze direct. "You have experience in community development, Amelia. Your skills are relevant to this initiative. My decision was purely professional." His answer was clear, leaving no room for misinterpretation. He saw her as a colleague, nothing more. The hope that had flickered within her died a quiet death. Over the following weeks, Amelia worked on the project, interacting with Daniel and his team in a strictly professional capacity. She observed him closely, noticing the subtle nuances of his personality, the way he commanded respect, the passion he brought to his work. The man she had once known was still there, buried beneath layers of success and perhaps a lingering hurt. She also had the opportunity to interact with his girlfriend, Olivia, a sharp, intelligent woman who seemed to complement Daniel perfectly. Watching them together, Amelia felt a profound sense of closure. Daniel had found his match, someone who understood his ambition and shared his drive. As Amelia continued to work on the community development project, something began to shift within her. Being back in Daniel's orbit, even in a professional capacity, forced her to confront the choices she had made and the person she had become. She realized that she had spent the past 5 years defined by her relationship with Ben, and then by its failure. She had lost sight of her own ambitions, her own passions. Working on this project, contributing her skills and expertise, reminded her of her own capabilities. She started to focus on her career, taking on more challenging assignments, pursuing professional development opportunities. She reconnected with old friends, nurtured new relationships, and began to build a life that was truly her own. Daniel, while maintaining a professional distance, seemed to notice the change in her. There were subtle shifts in his interactions with her, a slightly warmer tone, a more genuine smile, an occasional acknowledgement of her contributions that went beyond mere politeness. One afternoon, they were working late in Daniel's office, reviewing project proposals. A sudden thunderstorm rolled in, the sky darkening dramatically. The power flickered and then went out, plunging the office into darkness. For a moment, there was silence. Then Daniel chuckled softly. "Well, this is inconvenient." Amelia found herself laughing too, a genuine, unforced laugh. "Looks like we're stuck here for a while." They found a couple of flashlights and continued their discussion in the dim light, a sense of camaraderie developing in the unexpected intimacy of the darkness. They talked about the project, but also about their work, their challenges, their aspirations, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years. As the storm raged outside, Daniel shared a story about a difficult early project, revealing a vulnerability Amelia hadn't seen in a long time. Amelia, in turn, spoke about her renewed focus on her career, her desire to make a meaningful contribution. In that darkened office, stripped of the trappings of their vastly different lives, they found a flicker of the connection they had once shared, a reminder of the people they had been before life had taken its unexpected turns. When the power finally returned, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. There was a sense of unspoken understanding, a fragile bridge being built across the chasm of their past. The community development project was a resounding success, garnering praise from the city council and the local community. At the celebratory event, Daniel gave a speech acknowledging the contributions of his team, including Amelia. Amelia's insights and dedication were invaluable to this project, he said publicly, his gaze meeting hers for a brief, meaningful moment. Later that evening, as the event was winding down, Daniel approached Amelia. "I was thinking," he said, his tone casual, "there's a conference on sustainable urban development in Chicago next month. I have a few people from my firm attending. Would you be interested in joining us?" Amelia was surprised by the invitation. A professional conference in another city, with Daniel and his team? It felt like a significant step, a move beyond the strictly formal interactions they had maintained since their reunion. I don't know, Daniel," she stammered, caught off guard. "Think about it," he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "It would be a good opportunity to network and learn about new trends in the field." Amelia did think about it. A lot. Part of her was hesitant, wary of reading too much into his invitation. But another part of her, the part that had felt a flicker of connection in the darkened office, was intrigued. She decided to accept. The conference would be a chance to see Daniel in a different light, to interact with him as a colleague, to further her own professional growth. And perhaps, just perhaps, it would be an opportunity to explore the fragile bridge that had begun to form between them. The trip to Chicago was a new experience for Amelia. She was treated as a respected member of Daniel's team, her opinions valued, her expertise recognized. She spent time with Daniel, attending sessions, sharing meals, engaging in professional discussions. Their conversations remained focused on work, but there were moments of shared laughter, of comfortable silence, of a subtle understanding that transcended their past. Amelia saw a different side of Daniel, his passion for his work, his leadership qualities, his genuine respect for his colleagues. One evening, after a long day at the conference, they found themselves having dinner at a quiet restaurant. For the first time since their reunion, they veered away from professional topics. "I saw Olivia at the gala," Amelia said, her tone neutral. "She seems lovely." Daniel's expression softened slightly. "She is," he replied. "She's a good person." A brief silence followed. Then Daniel looked at Amelia, his gaze direct. "You seem different, Amelia," he said. "Happier, more focused." "I am," she admitted. "I've been working on myself, figuring out what I truly want." "And what is that?" he asked, his curiosity evident. "To build a meaningful life, independent of anyone else," she replied. "To make a difference in my work, to be true to myself." Daniel nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I think you're on the right path," he said quietly. The Chicago conference marked a turning point in Amelia and Daniel's relationship. While the romantic spark of their past remained dormant, a new kind of connection began to emerge, one based on mutual respect, understanding, and a shared history. They continued to work together on projects, their interactions becoming more relaxed and collaborative. Daniel seemed to have let go of some of the coolness that had defined their earlier encounters, treating Amelia with a genuine warmth and consideration. Amelia, in turn, had shed the guilt and regret that had weighed her down for so long. She had accepted her past mistakes and was focused on building a better future for herself. She no longer saw Daniel solely through the lens of their broken marriage, but as a successful colleague, a man she had once loved and now respected. One day, Daniel called Amelia into his office. "I have a proposition for you," he said, leaning back in his chair. "My firm is expanding, and I'm looking for a lead architect for our community development division. I think you would be perfect for the role." Amelia was stunned. A lead architect position with Daniel's firm? It was an incredible opportunity, one she hadn't dared to imagine. "Daniel, I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Think about it," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "You're talented, dedicated, and you have a real passion for this kind of work. I believe you would be a valuable asset to the team." Amelia did think about it, carefully considering the implications. Working closely with Daniel again would be a significant step, one that would require her to confront their past on a daily basis. But the opportunity was too good to pass up, and she trusted that they had both grown enough to handle it professionally. She accepted the offer and began a new chapter in her career, working alongside the man she had once left, now as a respected colleague and a key member of his growing empire. Their interactions in the office were professional and focused, but there were occasional moments of shared laughter or understanding glances that hinted at the complex history between them. They had found a way to coexist, to work together, to build something new on the foundation of their shared past. Amelia also observed Daniel's relationship with Olivia. They seemed genuinely happy, their connection based on mutual respect and shared ambition. Amelia felt no jealousy, only a sense of peace, knowing that Daniel had found happiness. One evening, Daniel and Amelia were the last ones in the office, working on a deadline. A comfortable silence settled between them as they reviewed blueprints. "You know, Amelia," Daniel said quietly without looking up, "I never thought we'd be working together again." "Me neither," she replied softly. "Life has a funny way of surprising you," he said, finally meeting her gaze. There was no bitterness in his eyes, only a quiet acceptance. "It does," Amelia agreed. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched Daniel's lips. "I'm glad you're here, Amelia," he said. "You're good at what you do." "Thank you, Daniel," she replied, a genuine warmth spreading through her. In that moment, Amelia realized that their story wasn't about betrayal or power imbalances, or even redemption in the traditional sense. It was about growth, about forgiveness, about the unexpected ways life can bring people back together, not as lovers, but as individuals who had shared a significant part of their journey and had both found their own paths forward. Part 10. The New Horizon. Years passed. Amelia thrived in her role as lead architect, playing a key part in Daniel's continued success. Their professional relationship was strong, built on mutual respect and a shared passion for their work. They had navigated the complexities of their past and forged a new, functional dynamic. Daniel and Olivia's relationship continued to flourish, and they eventually married. Amelia was happy for them, attending their wedding as a friend and colleague. Amelia herself found love again, with a kind and supportive man who appreciated her for who she was. She had learned from her past mistakes, valuing honesty, communication, and a deeper connection over fleeting passions. One afternoon, Daniel and Amelia were discussing a new project over coffee. "You know," Daniel said, taking a sip of his latte, "sometimes I look back and I can hardly believe everything that's happened." "Me too," Amelia replied. "It feels like a lifetime ago." "I'm glad things turned out the way they did," Daniel said, his gaze thoughtful. "Not in the beginning, of course, but eventually. I think we both learned some valuable lessons." "We did," Amelia agreed. "We both had to find ourselves again, in different ways." "And we did," Daniel said, a genuine smile gracing his lips. Their story wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was a real one, filled with the complexities of human nature, the consequences of choices, and the possibility of finding peace, and even a form of reconciliation after heartbreak. They had both moved on, built new lives, and found a way to navigate their shared history with grace and understanding. The ex-husband had become a billionaire, not as a triumph over his ex-wife, but as a testament to his resilience and drive. And the ex-wife had found her own path to fulfillment, learning that true happiness comes not from chasing fleeting dreams, but from building a solid foundation of self-worth and meaningful connections. Their story was a reminder that even after the most dramatic twists and turns, life continues, offering unexpected opportunities for growth, forgiveness, and the possibility of a new horizon. Amelia's story, interwoven with Daniel's ascent, serves as a potent reminder of the unpredictable nature of life and the enduring impact of our choices. It delves into the complexities of love, ambition, and the often difficult path to self-discovery. We witness the devastating consequences of impulsive decisions, the transformative power of adversity, and the surprising ways in which broken connections can evolve into something unexpected. Ultimately, it's a story about human resilience, the capacity for forgiveness, and the possibility of finding peace even after the stormiest of separations. If you found Amelia and Daniel's journey compelling, if you've ever grappled with the complexities of relationships and second chances, please like this video. Share it with others who might find resonance in their story, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotionally charged narratives. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to life. What were your thoughts on Amelia's choices? Did Daniel's success surprise you? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.